Non-formal learning is a loosely defined term covering various structured learning situations, such as swimming sessions for toddlers, community-based sports programs and conference-style seminars, which do not either have the level of curriculum, syllabus, accreditation and certification associated with formal learning, but have more structure than that associated with informal learning, which typically take place naturally and spontaneously as part of other activities. These form the three styles of learning recognized and supported by the OECD. Examples of non-formal learning include swimming sessions for toddlers, community-based sports programs, and programs developed by organizations such as the Boy Scouts or the Girl Guides, community and non-credit adult education courses, sports or fitness programs, professional conferences and continuing professional development. The learner's objectives may be to increase skills and knowledge, as well as to experience the emotional rewards associated with increased love for a subject or increased passion for learning. History. The debate over the relative value of formal and informal learning has existed for a number of years. Traditionally, formal learning that takes place in a school or university and has a greater value placed upon it than informal learning, such as learning within the workplace. This concept of formal learning being the socio-cultural accepted norm for learning was first challenged by Scribner and Cole in 1973, who claimed most things in life are better learned through informal processes, citing language learning as an example. Moreover, anthropologists noted that complex learning still takes place within indigenous communities that had no formal educational institutions. It's the acquisition of this knowledge or learning which occurs in everyday life that has not been fully valued or understood. This led to the declaration by the OECD educational ministers of the Lifelong Learning for All strategy in 1996. This includes 23 countries from 5 continents, who have sought to clarify and validate all forms of learning including formal, non-formal and informal. This has been in conjunction with the European Union, which has also developed policies for lifelong learning which focus strongly on the need to identify, assess and certify non-formal and informal learning, particularly in the workplace. Characteristics of non-formal education, relevance to the needs of disadvantaged groups, concern with specific categories of person, a focus on clearly defined purpose, flexibility in organization and methods. Goals, objectives of non-formal education, provides functional literacy and continuing education for adults and youths who have not had the advantage of formal education or who did not complete their primary education. Provide functional and remedial education for the young people who did not complete the secondary education. Provide education to different categories of graduates to improve the basic knowledge and skills. Provide in-service, on-the-job, vocational and professional training to different categories of workers and professionals to improve the skills. Give adult citizens of different parts of the country necessarily aesthetic, cultural and civic education for public enlightenment. Countries involved in recognition of non-formal learning, formal, informal and non-formal learning. Although all definitions can be contested, this article shall refer to the European Centre for the Development of Vocational Training 2001. Communication on lifelong learning, formal, non-formal and informal learning, as the guideline for the differing definitions. Formal learning. Learning typically provided by an education or training institution, structured and leading to certification. Formal learning is intentional from the learner's perspective. Informal learning. Learning resulting from daily life, activities related to work, family or leisure. It is not structured and typically does not lead to certification. Informal learning may be intentional, but in most cases it is not intentional. Non-formal learning, see definition above. Contested definitions. If there is no clear distinction between formal and informal learning, where is the room for non-formal learning? It is a contested issue with numerous definitions given. The following are some of the competing theories. It is difficult to make a clear distinction between formal and informal learning, as there is often a crossover between the two. Similarly, Hodgkinson et al. Conclude after a significant literature analysis on the topics of formal, informal, and non-formal learning, that the terms informal and non-formal appeared interchangeable, each being primarily defined in opposition to the dominant formal education system, and the largely individualist and acquisitional conceptualizations of learning developed in relation to such educational contexts. Moreover, he states that it is important not to see informal and formal attributes as somehow separate or waiting to be integrated. This is the dominant view in the literature, and it is mistaken. Thus, the challenge is not to somehow combine informal and formal learning, for informal and formal attributes are present and interrelated, whether we will it so or not. The challenge is to recognize and identify them, and understand the implications. For this reason, the concept of non-formal learning, at least when seen as a middle state between formal and informal, is redundant. Arat's classification of learning into formal and non-formal. This removes informal learning from the equation and states all learning outside of formal learning is non-formal. Arat equates informal with connotations of dress, language, or behavior that have no relation to learning. Arat defines formal learning as taking place within a learning framework, within a classroom, a learning institution, with a designated teacher, a trainer, the award of a qualification, a credit, the external specification of outcomes. Any learning that occurs outside of these parameters is non-formal. The EC Communication on Lifelong Learning, Formal, Non-Formal and Informal Learning. The EU places non-formal learning in between formal and informal learning. This has learning both in a formal setting with a learning framework and as an organized event but within a qualification. Non-formal learning, learning that is not provided by an education or training institution and typically does not lead to certification. It is, however, structured. Non-formal learning is intentional from the learner's perspective. Livingstone's Adults' Formal and Informal Education, Non-Formal and Informal Learning. This focuses on the idea of adult, non-formal education. This new mode, informal education, is when teachers or mentors guide learners without reference to structured learning outcomes. This informal education learning is gaining knowledge without an imposed framework, such as learning new job skills. Billet. There is no such thing as informal learning. Billet's definition states there is no such thing as non-formal and informal learning. He states all human activity is learning, and that everything people do involves a process of learning. All learning takes place within social organizations or communities that have formalized structures. Moreover, he states most learning in life takes place outside of formal education. The validation. OECD.These has created European guidelines to provide validation to a broad range of learning experiences, thereby aiding transparency and comparability across its national borders. The broad framework for achieving this certification across both non-formal and informal learning is outlined in the OECD.These European Guidelines for validating non-formal and informal learning, routes from learning to certification. Different countries' approaches. There are different approaches to validation between OECD and EU countries, with countries adopting different measures. The EU, as noted above, through the CEDAFOP released European guidelines for validating non-formal and informal learning in 2009 to standardize validation throughout the EU. Within the OECD countries, the picture is more mixed. Countries with the existence of recognition for non-formal and informal learning, non-formal education, flexible schooling or participatory schooling. Non-formal education is popular on a worldwide scale in both Western and developing countries. Non-formal education can form a matrix with formal and non-formal education, as non-formal education can mean any form of systematic learning conducted outside the formal setting. Many courses in relation to non-formal education have been introduced in several universities in Western and developing countries. The UNESCO Institute of Education conducted a seminar on non-formal education in Morocco. The Association for Development of Education in Africa launched many programs in non-formal education in at least 15 countries of sub-Saharan Africa. In 2001, World Bank conducted an international seminar on basic education in non-formal program. In addition to this, the World Bank was advised to extend its services to adult and non-formal education. A report on vocational education, making learning visible, the identification, assessment and recognition of non-formal learning in Europe, defines non-formal learning as semi-structured, consisting of planned and explicit approaches to learning introduced into work organizations and elsewhere, not recognized within the formal education and training system. Types of non-formal education. Community work, which is particularly widespread in Scotland, fosters people's commitment to the neighbours and encourages participation in and development of local democratic forms of organisation. Youth work, which focuses on making people more active in the society. Social work, which helps young people in homes to develop ways to deal with complex situations like fostering fruitful relationships between parents and children, bringing different groups of career together, etc. In France and Italy, animation in a particular form is a kind of non-formal education. It uses theatre and acting as means of self-expression with different community groups for children and people with special needs. This type of non-formal education helps in ensuring active participation and teaches people to manage the community in which they live. Youth and community organizations. Young people have the opportunity to discover, analyze and understand values and their implications and build a set of values to guide their lives. They run work camps and meetings, recruit volunteers, administer bank accounts, give counseling, etc. to work towards social change. Importance of non-formal education. Education plays an important role in development. Out-of-school programs are important to provide adaptable learning opportunities and new skills and knowledge to a large percentage of people who are beyond the reach of formal education. Non-formal education began to gain popularity in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Today, non-formal education is seen as a concept of recurrent and lifelong learning. Non-formal education is popular among the adults, especially the women, as it increases women's participation in both private and public activities, i.e. in household decision-making, and as active citizens in the community affairs and national development. These literacy programs have a dramatic impact on women's self-esteem because they unleash the potential in economic, social, cultural and political spheres. According to UNESCO, non-formal education helps to ensure equal access to education, or eradicate illiteracy among women and improve women's access to vocational training, science, technology and continuing education. It also encourages the development of non-discriminatory education and training. The effectiveness of such literacy and non-formal education programs are bolstered by family, community and parental involvement. Bold text. Advantages of non-formal education. Non-formal education is beneficial in a number of ways. There are activities that encourage young people to choose their own program and projects that are important because they offer the youth the flexibility and freedom to explore their emerging interests. When the youth can choose the activities in which they can participate, they have opportunities to develop several skills like decision-making skills. Non-formal learning has experiential learning activities that foster the development of skills and knowledge. This helps in building the confidence and abilities among the youth of today. It also helps in development of personal relationships not only among the youth but also among the adults. It helps in developing interpersonal skills among the young people as they learn to interact with peers outside the class and with adults in the community. Disadvantages of non-formal education. There are drawbacks to non-formal education which include that non-formal learning is not based on curriculum but based on experience. There is low efficiency in non-formal education. Why is non-formal education necessary? Formal education systems are inadequate to effectively meet the needs of the individual and the society. The need to offer more and better education at all levels to a growing number of people, particularly in developing countries. The scant success of current formal education systems to meet all such demands has shown the need to develop alternatives to learning. The rigid structure of formal schools, mainly because of rules and regulations than concentrating on the real need of the students, offering curriculum that leans away from the individual and from society, far more concerned with performing programs than reaching useful objectives. This called for non-formal education which, starting from the basic need of the students, is concerned with the establishment of strategies that are compatible with reality.